What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Honor the Land. I am Max Loeb. Loeb's Leads here with Chef Zay in the middle of week 1 and 2 of Cleveland Browns preseason. Coming off a loss to the Green Bay Packers in week 1 of preseason, but looking ahead to joint practices and week 2's preseason game at home, 4:25 p.m. Eastern Saturday against the Minnesota Vikings. Without J.J. McCarthy now, there is some news in relation to that. But Zay, how are you doing? How did you feel about week 1 of the preseason? Everybody kind of getting out there, getting their feet wet a little bit, especially for the rookies. What were your initial thoughts?
Well, I definitely think it wasn't what we all expected. We would have liked a little better performance, obviously. Um, the defense, it looks like we are missing some of those back end guys when it comes to the third, fourth round rotations because some of the plays that we saw let up definitely weren't in the DNA of what we've seen from the team last year in those third and fourth stringers. But a couple players that stuck out to me, I think, would easily be Devin Bush on the defensive side of the ball. I know a lot of people went to Breeze, but seeing Devin Bush make those plays when everybody isn't even giving this guy the shadow of a doubt, you love to see that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, there two really. I think Brown he only had 2 catches, which was surprising. I think one of them got called back, which is what I'm thinking of. But he looked really good at the receiver position, which was somebody we haven't really touched on or talked about much, really. And obvious answer, DTR. The man, the conversation between DTR has now elevated to a point where I don't think you can just ignore it. I don't think it's just a simple, easy answer of saying, hope he slips through the cracks. You have a real decision on your hand, and I think Andrew Berry is going to have to figure out what he's going to do there. But those are just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, he's not slipping through the cracks. I'm 100% with you. Like that, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, as I'm sure some people who have listened before, which if you guys haven't, welcome, know that I am on the team find a trade for Tyler Huntley boat. I don't know who it's going to be, but we've seen it. Quarterbacks get injured. Quarterbacks have gotten injured in the preseason, but the way that DTR played was undeniably good, and he's going to have another great opportunity this Saturday. Deshaun Watson will not play this Saturday. You assume Jameis is out there at least for a drive, but who knows? Maybe they give Huntley a half. Maybe they give DTR a half. Who knows? Who knows what they do? He's going to have an opportunity regardless. It was undeniably good. Like, he is obviously a playmaker. We know he can use his legs. He's not afraid to break the pocket and go make plays. He was standing in the pocket and ripping throws that you expect a starter to make. And, practice squad players, you're going against third stringers, whatever. There are certain traits that you have to have as a player to exceed against anybody. And he demonstrated those for sure. And I think what's the craziest thing about this whole thing, we talk about DTR, so praise him so much, talk about him so highly. It's Tyler Huntley still played fine. And that's the issue. It's such a good problem to have. We talked about it a couple episodes ago. When has there been a world where the Browns just have so many good players at a position? You're like, oh, we got to cut a good player. Never.
Never, ever, ever. And it's funny because Tyler Huntley didn't look bad. And when you watch him play and that ability, his scrambling ability is just it's such a beautiful asset to have because the play is technically never over. Now, this isn't to say that DTR cannot do that. We've seen him do that on a 4th and 1, escape the pocket, make a beautiful hurdle play, and get the first down. But when it's levels to this, and the level of escapability that Tyler Huntley has, he's obviously a veteran in this league. He's played behind an MVP quarterback. He knows how to win football games. It's so hard to just look at that and be like, yeah, we're going to let this go. So I'm with you, man. I really, really hope that they can find a trade partner for him and get something out of it than just being like, yeah, we're going to have to cut him loose. And then he ends up back in the AFC North somehow or something stupid like that.
Well, that would be bad if he wound up back in the AFC North. I mean, who knows what would happen? I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see where the trade partner is. I don't think the Browns would trade him. I don't think they trade him to an AFC team, period. Definitely wouldn't do it to an AFC North team. That stuff happens so rarely. But you never know. And we talked about the quarterback injuries that are going on. Like J.J. McCarthy is out for an extended period of time. And the Vikings are in a spot where maybe they don't necessarily need to trade for a backup of that caliber right this second. But they happen. And knock on wood, they don't. But the reality of football in the NFL is that they will at some point to some team, some position. So it's definitely interesting to see. We wait to see what they do with Tyler Huntley. Obviously, all eyes will be on them on Saturday. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I'm glad you brought up Devin Bush because You look at the Browns linebacker depth, and
Wait, breaking
everybody's
news, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. Browns have extended JOK. Browns have extended JOK.
no
Browns
way.
have extended JOK.
No
Yes,
way. Wow. Hold on. We gotta.
breaking news. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
I'm
that
so
is
glad you did.
yes, he's here. He's here. Hold on. I'm trying to get the details on it.
Yeah,
It's a
pull it up. Pull it up. Pull it up.
3-year,
Wow.
39 million, 25 guaranteed in negotiation. He has been extended. Yes.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
That is what you love to freaking see.
Wow.
And
That's insane. I'm glad we were recording when that happened. Wow. So it's JOK. It's 39, 339 with 25 guaranteed, which is pretty good. He's only 24. And this is an extension. It's not even like
yep.
it's a new deal. It's a new deal, I guess. But that's awesome. Wow. I can't believe that. That's unbelievable.
That is the best news. I mean, what a ironic time for it to come out with the stuff swirling around. But man, we got it done. It was about dang time. And let's freaking go, man. Another cornerstone piece solidified. That is major.
Wow. That I can't believe it. I did not well, you know what? We'll move to the mailbag episodes here or mailbag questions in a minute because there was a huge question that popped up with JOK with all of that stuff. Let's just move to it now. I want to make sure we talk about that before anything else while it's hot. So, assuming we extend JOK, which literally just happened live, are there studs that you think the Browns are going to have to part ways with soon due to cap problems like Amari Cooper, Greg Newsome, anybody like that? Who do you think is the first to go? This is insane.
You know, I think with Amari Cooper saying that he wants to be a Cleveland Brown and he would like to retire a Cleveland Brown, I think there's a possibility for him to be back next year. But with that being said, I also think that he might be the first one that's out the door just for the simple fact that the contract, we know he ultimately probably wants to get paid. If we can't give him the number close to what he wants, he probably walks. So that's just the first initial thought. I think Greg Newsome is definitely going to be up there. Depending on how Cam Mitchell plays or some of these back end guys at the corner position. But really where you're going to lose most of your depth is going to come on the defensive line. You've got a bunch of one-year guys. Maurice Hurst, I believe, is on a 1 year. Shelby Harris, I believe, is on a 1 year. And I think a lot of 1 year deals, obviously Rodney McLeod is on this 1 year. Juan Thornhill is going to be up on another year. So there's a lot of open spaces that will be on this team. If I had to go anywhere, if I rank them, I would say Newsome 1, Cooper 1B, I think is pretty safe to say. And then the defensive line falls into place. That's automatic.
Newsome 1 as in being the most likely to go?
Just for the simple fact that I think that the money, this is Newsome's first big contract year, if I'm not mistaken. So he hasn't collected the big bag yet. And you know, Martin Emerson's going to need a contract. He's going to be up next. When you talk about the guys next up, you got all your big guys. Eventually, you're going to want to talk about re-extending Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, what's going to happen with that situation. So there's going to be players that need to be paid. And I think if Greg Newsome can collect the bag from somewhere else and get an opportunity to maybe get back at that position where he's so comfortable at, which is the outside, he more than likely might take that. But I would say Newsome would probably be the first one to go get the bag somewhere.
Yeah. I'm glad you said opportunity because I agree. I think Newsome is the most likely to go for sure. I think it's more opportunity than money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think, obviously, you know, he wants to get paid, and the reality is the Browns probably won't be able to pay him. But he could go to a team and be one of their top 2 corners. The reality is that's not going to happen in Cleveland, at least anytime soon, especially because he's found this little niche as you know, a nickel, a versatile guy who can do a lot of things. Anybody who watched last year obviously saw him do a lot of different things in coverage, but he was part of a lot of blitz packages as well because he can move off the line of scrimmage. He's a little bit longer. He can cover more ground in a shorter amount of time. That is a really good thing that teams are going to look at and they're going to like. But if you're Newsome, you have an opportunity to go to a team to be a starting outside guy, which would probably happen on a lot of teams if he left. I think it's a no-brainer for you. With that being said, that Jim Schwartz defense is special. People obviously love playing in Cleveland, love playing under Jim Schwartz. And pay cuts are a thing. Like, we've seen it before. I think if there's any team in the NFL, yeah,
The JOK one's kind of a pay cut as I'm looking at this. Like, really, this is it? Like, this is a pay cut.
It is really crazy to see that pay cuts are a very real thing in the NFL. I think honestly the most likely person to do it would be Amari Cooper, especially because he's talked about retiring a Brown. What that pay cut would look like is super different compared to what the contract is now and what it'll look like next year. But if there's any team in the NFL that will allow somebody or make somebody feel comfortable taking a pay cut, it's the Cleveland Browns, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, I think you talk about the opportunity. I also think you could flip the other side of the coin and say, he likes it here. And not only do I think he likes it here, I think he loves it here. I think he loves the group of guys that he's playing with. I think if he has an opportunity to continue something special, he feels like he's that type of guy. I think he understands the value that he brings, not only on the field, but into this locker room. When you talk about the energy sparks, when you talk about the vibes that he has, there isn't a time that you see Greg Newsome down in the dumps. There isn't a time where Greg Newsome has his head down because he got burnt on a play. Like, that is something that is very, very hard to come by when you talk about locker room guys and the opportunity to play in this opportunity, like the number one defense in the league. So I'm a big Greg Newsome guy. I know a lot of people point to that Denver game and then they like to go to the Houston game in the playoffs and say, well, look at how bad it could be. It's just like, I'll remain patent on it. We are not the elite secondary that we call ourselves without Greg Newsome. He is that special, and he's the perfect piece, as Tristan Thompson liked to said, in that 2016 championship that we had. He's the perfect piece to the secondary puzzle. So I'm all for him taking a pay cut and wanting to run this thing back as long as he can.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that pay cut idea. So JOK, like we just talked about, it's 3 years with 25 guaranteed out of 39, but an average annual value potentially of $13 million a year. To put into perspective, that is below Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, and Patrick Queen. He's right between Patrick Queen and Azeez Al-Shaair of the Houston Texans, who also just signed a contract this year. That is a pay cut. Like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is an all-pro player. He's an unbelievable talent. He could get top-end Roquan Smith money from another team, I think. That's a pay cut to stay with the Cleveland Browns.
You know what it feels like too, though? The 3-year thing, I think, is huge because that 3-year mark, I think, is the next part of this vision that they have. Like, this is the last part of this vision that they saw with Deshaun Watson. It's either going to succeed or it's going to fail, one way or the other. I don't think there's no in between. I think you look at JOK, I think he knows he wants to be here long term. That next contract that he gets, I think, is the "we'll do right by you" contract. He'll get his more money. I think he'll probably solidify himself. This is going to be a piece to where they can work around other contracts because, like we're talking about, other guys will need to be paid. Where's that money going to come from? This is a do right by Jeremiah now. And I think this is a just stay with us and we'll get you on the back end as well. At least that's what I'm hoping because he's been on the record saying that he wants to be here his entire career. So I don't see why the Cleveland Browns organization cannot make that happen.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think timing wise, obviously the vision matters. Yes. The do right by you contract. It's tough because it's a business and it's tough because things could happen down the line where flat out you don't deserve the money you could be or what could be waiting for or are waiting for in a contract like that. But there's no better linebacker in the NFL to play the role that JOK plays than JOK. He's plays with his head cut off. He runs around with reckless abandon, blows plays up, and allows other players to blow plays up as well. I think when you look at what the Browns want to do defensively, obviously the defensive line helps out a lot, but it opens up lanes for guys like JOK to make plays. And not a lot of the linebackers in the NFL, especially those weak side off-ball guys, can do what JOK does. So I think no-brainer for the Browns to extend him, no-brainer for the Browns to pay him. Do they pay him more in 3 years? We wait to see. But great breaking news this morning on Honor the Land. Unbelievable stuff. JOK gets paid 3 years, $39 million, $25 million guaranteed. I do want to shift the focus back to the offensive side of the ball because there was another question that was asked that was honestly something even you and I have just neglected in the offseason. I talked very, very briefly about it in the first podcast episode, but tight end depth, because we are so gung-ho on David Njoku. We are so enthralled with the Browns pass offense in the receiver room. What does the tight end depth look like behind David Njoku? I think it's scary, to be honest with you.
Only reason why I'm not as scared as I think you probably are is for the simple fact that the guy that is behind, Njoku is Akins, which has been here. He's very familiar with Deshaun Watson, and they're shifting from that personnel set where we have all of these tight ends. Like there were times where we seen 3 tight ends on the field at one point. You know what I mean? We seen Akins, Bryant, and Njoku all on the same field. So I think they're shifting from that, and I don't think you're going to need as many tight ends as you once did. So obviously, if you're talking about nobody getting injured, I think we're perfectly fine there. Like I said, having Akins on that and that back end, and him being with Deshaun Watson, not only here for a couple years now, but in Texas, I think our tight end position is fine because as long as 85 is on the field, that's the one thing that I'm worried about. You got plenty of other skilled position guys that can, carry that load.
I hate to even put this thought out there. If not JOK, my mind's so set on JOK. If David Njoku is not on the field for whatever reason, are you comfortable running the same offense you've been running? Do you have to change dramatically what you've been doing?
Well, I mean, we don't know what the offense is going to look like now. I don't think, I think it's kind of us being fans. We can only speculate and try to guess what it could look like. But whether David Njoku's on the field or not, I don't think that's going to change the fact that they don't want to run what is it, 11 personnel, 12 personnel. They want to go 4 receiver sets now. So I don't think it scares me because we're talking about 6, 7 receiver positions that one of them's got to go. So it's like it's the peripherals. You need your peripherals, but I'm not going to worry about that until it gets down to it. And I'm not banking on Njoku getting injured. So I'm going to keep that negativity out of my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Hopefully we don't have to ever cross that bridge. I don't know if we will, but hopefully we never do. And for the Browns fans who may not know more about the tight end depth, Jordan Akins is obviously the backup, played with Deshaun Watson in Houston. A little bit of a bigger body, but the third string, Zaire Mitchell-Patton, is 6'5", 257. Obviously not a producer, at least in the past in the NFL. He's young. I think if something were to happen, they would be in trouble in terms of free agents. I think they'd have to find their answer in-house. The only name that sticks out to me that is even remotely possible that's available right now is Logan Thomas, guy that was productive in Washington. They went a different direction at tight end position, drafted a guy. So I think if something were to happen, they would have to find their answers in-house. It would concern me a little bit, to be honest with you, but hopefully we don't have to cross that bridge. I don't know if we will. I hate to even think about it, but it is a very valid question to look at the tight end depth behind David Njoku because there's a lot of unfamiliarity. Harrison Bryant is now gone. I think there are some question marks. Now, on the topic of fear and potential, bad things happening to the Browns, I hate to even bring this one up, but this is another super valid question. How fearful should Browns fans be of their strength of schedule? Because you look at this schedule, obviously playing in the AFC North is no joke, but you have multiple playoff teams outside of your division and outside of your conference that you're going to have to face. Obviously, the Browns are very good, and I think anybody will say that before anything else. But how fearful should Browns fans be of this really difficult schedule?
I like to refer back to the players, man. We're fans. We can talk all we want, but what are the players' confidence? Myles Garrett and these dudes think that they shouldn't be losing at home, right? It all rides on these first 6 weeks of the year are about as most important 6 weeks, I think, even when you talk about that back end, because we know how that stretch after this first 6 weeks is brutal. Talk about a gauntlet. You got some serious opponents, and then you talk about the AFC North coming into the equation, which we all expect to probably be over 500 this year. I think it's if they can control 4-1, if they can really come out 5-0. You put yourself in such a great position. And at that point, the only thing you fear is yourself, because no one should be putting any fear into you. I think you'd be able to prove in that you are here in this moment. And at that point, all the cards are in your hands. You dictate your outcome. And if if you chop this opportunity, it's not the schedule's fault. It's not the player, it's your fault. So I don't think there should be any fear. We know we have the best schedule. It's not like it's a surprise. So if anything, the surprise is going to be, well, maybe the schedule wasn't as hard as it was because every year we go into it, we think we know how these teams are going to be. And then out of nowhere, you've got random teams being in contention, which you wouldn't thought up at the beginning of the year. So I'm not going to put too much fear into it for the simple fact that we were out 10 plus guys last year who have a drastic decision on the outcome of these games, and they're back this year. So I'm ready. Forget the fear.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you brought up a really good point about the strength of schedule being a last year thing. Like when you look at any graphic, any numbers as it relates to strength of schedule, it looks at the record from last season, and teams change dramatically throughout the offseason. Like even a few teams the Browns play, like the Washington Commanders will look totally different, probably in a more positive sense for them. You don't know what the New Orleans Saints are going to look like as it compares to last year. I think the Chargers got worse. Obviously, they're rebuilding a little bit, but you got teams that are really different from last year, and then you have the other powerhouses. So looking at the schedule, the out of AFC North teams that the Browns will have to play that made the playoffs last year, obviously Dallas week 1, and then you have Philly, you have
familiar
the
team,
Kansas City Chiefs, the Dolphins, and that's it. So it's if I'm correct, 4 out of conference or out of division, playoff teams from last year. Obviously, you have the Ravens twice, Steelers twice, you get the Bengals twice, who are going to be better than they were last year, I think. And then you have other teams that, you feel like you should be, like New Orleans, Vegas, the Giants, the Commanders, even the Jaguars. So I think there is an appropriate respect or appreciation for how difficult the schedule is for the Browns that, needs to be taken into account, needs to be thought about when you do these record predictions, which we will be doing down the line. But like you talked about, if you're in-house, you understand how good you are as a team. You understand what you're able to do last year with a moderately difficult schedule, losing so many players. The bottom line is these teams have to play the Browns too. It's not like, oh, the Browns got all these tough. No, we don't. We got to go play the Cleveland Browns. We got to go travel to Cleveland and play the Browns for some of these games too. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to play the Browns.
Especially in December in that late end. And you talk about the out of conference games, the Chiefs they're at home. The Dallas Cowboys are at home. Like the games that you want to be at home, you're at home. So we're gonna get a real good test because if the goal is to win the division, and to make it to an AFC championship, you're going to be playing a home playoff game in Cleveland. And like you said, no one wants to come in Cleveland as it is for whatever reason they have, but no one's going to want to come here in the playoffs in January with snow, with the dog pound and the wind. It's going to be a nightmare for a team. So if they continue to do what they did last year, and that's dominate at home, I'm fine with losing some out of conference games. I'm fine with losing some of those games that like the New Orleans game or, one of those teams that not going to have a huge impact down the road. Obviously, New Orleans, you should be winning that game. But let's be honest with ourselves. There's always 1 or 2 games throughout the season that one slips through the cracks and we lose or something fluke happens. And so prepare yourself. But maybe we don't get that. And maybe this is the year we win 12, 13 games with a hard schedule.
Yeah, it's very feasible. And you talk about those games like in December where the Browns will be hosting. You host the Chiefs and the Dolphins in a really tough environment, especially for Miami. I mean, that's the big elephant in the room when you talk about the Dolphins, how they play later on the season, out of their elements, on the road too. But you play them, you host the Chiefs like that. If you're the Dolphins or the Chiefs, the last thing you want to do when you look at when you play the Browns is play them on the road in December. You get Dallas at home week 1 with a whole offseason
with a lot of momentum.
I think if you're trying to play a team, trying to beat a team that's very good. I don't know if Dallas is better than the Browns. I think it's pretty close, but you either get the offseason and get him while there's minimal film on this new team and just say our guys are better than yours, or you get him in the elements like the Browns do. The only really tough game that doesn't have, at least on paper, tough game that doesn't have any element or home advantage for the Browns is Philly. It's October 13th, I believe, on the road. Like that's just going to be, look, you got to go into Philly. The weather is going to be fine. Well, we think it's not going to be cold. It's not going to be snowing. You're going to be on the road. That team, honestly, probably is better than you. You got to find a way to beat them. That's really the only one that scares me.
And you're kind of hoping that you kind of hope what you're feeling over there in Philly comes to fruition when you go in there, because who knows, by October 13th, it could be a complete disaster in Philly. It was starting to feel like a disaster towards the end of last year. And if that carries into this year, if they start out, I don't know what their schedule is, but if they come out rocky these first few weeks, we could catch them at a very good time. Which you're talking about coming off a very first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then if you could catch Philly into that stretch, which is Philly, Cincy, Ravens, Chargers, man, you could really set yourself up there for something special. Talking about a historic run in this beginning, so I just can't wait for this kickoff, bro. September is getting here pretty fast, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is coming fast. But before we kick off week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys, still do have 2 more preseason games. Obviously, this Saturday, the Browns host their last preseason game at home against the Minnesota Vikings. Like we alluded to earlier on in the episode, JJ McCarthy will not be playing. Honestly, that was something I was looking forward to, especially coming to Cleveland, being the Michigan guy he is. But as we look forward to that preseason game 2, I got to ask, especially after last week, it's the middle of the 3-game stretch in the preseason. Is it possible for anybody to have a make or break game?
I don't think it's a make or break. I think it's more so of a conversation debater starter, because I think spots are so limited that it will be very, very hard for somebody to make or break. Now, unless you're talking about DTR, I think that could be a conversation that maybe make or break. But even then, I don't think there's one position or one player that I could just point to and be like, yeah, let's just say if David Bell comes out, because I know David Bell came into our mailbag conversation. If David Bell comes out and drops the 3 targets that he goes for, and on 3rd down conversions, is he going to be cut? Like, I just don't see that happening with this team, because I think a lot of people have earned their right, essentially. I don't know if that's the right thing to say.
No, I think you're right in saying that players have earned their rights, at least the guys who have been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there's a certain respect for the players who have been there, who have made the roster in the past, that almost goes unsaid and unnoticed as time goes on. But like, I'm glad you brought up David Bell. Obviously, it was in the mailbag. Like, the question was, is this David Bell's last run in with the Browns? We don't know. Like that, it's too early to tell.
Mm-hmm.
You got to see how these rookie receivers do. But that's kind of my point here. That receiver room is so tight, especially with those last, like, David Bell's gonna make the roster, so I'll say last 2 spots. If there's a make or break position, like if there's eyes on you from the staff at a position, it has to be receiver. Michael Woods looked great last week.
Yes,
I think obviously James Prochet, your returning value. Then you got Jamari Thrash. There's other guys on this roster that you can't keep all of them. Somebody's gonna make a practice squad. You can't keep all of them. So I'm with you in saying it's week 2 preseason. You can't make or break, at least from what we see as fans. Maybe there's some stuff internally that you don't know, but if there's a position that like there's more pressure than ever, it's receiver for sure.
Like, I think so. I want to ask this question: is it receiver the number 1 position? Because I think I think the quarterback, the 3rd and 4th position, is so much closer than we're giving it, because everyone just assumes, like, I think we're almost assuming that DTR is just going to make the team. And I don't know if that's the feel. Like, obviously, we don't have no feel inside the locker room, but I just wish there was some kind of feel at that quarterback position, because, yeah, we know how tight this is, but it's like, who's the last? So it's Cooper, Judy, Moore, Tillman, Bell, Thrash.
I think at least as it looks right now, Prochet will be on there.
Okay, so take Thrash off and put Prochet. That's 6. Yeah. Now you're talking about a battle between Thrash, Woods, Darden, Landers, and Brown.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Jalen Darden. Yeah.
And but Jalen Darden didn't have a very strong preseason game.
Yeah.
And, I was very hyped to see him on the return game, and there wasn't much on the return game that jumped off the charts too. So it's like, when you talk about a make or break, okay, we can go to that and be like, yeah, for a guy like Jalen Darden, for a guy like Michael Woods, for a guy like Amiri Brown and Matt Landers, there could be some make or break in that, because I think this is a huge week for Darlin. He needs to jump out on the charts in order to keep his name in that conversation of wanting to be this team, because if we're giving Porsche the nod for the simple fact that he's going to be our returner, where are you going to fit in on this roster, buddy? Because I think they're going to lean towards Michael Woods, a guy who has been on this roster for a couple years now, who has made it through injuries, which is that's crazy to me to think that he's made it through injuries. There's something there with him. He has to make the roster. He has to.
I think if you want to bring a bigger body on, it's got to be Woods. It's just, I don't know. How comfortable do you feel with losing another slot guy? How comfortable do you feel losing another downfield guy? Because the reality is you're going to lose at least one, because I would be super shocked if the last two receivers were Thrash and Darden and they left Proche. I think Proche, not a lock, but I think because of the special teams value he provides, he'll be on the team. But I'm glad you brought up the quarterbacks. Everybody talks about it. What I really think is that if it's this close, where you're like, Huntley can do A, B, and C, and then DTR can do A, B, and C, I think still the internal conversations are, is there a way, because the Browns know they have to get one of them off the roster in some sense, whether it's practice squad, trade, whatever. Is there a way we can get Huntley off the roster? Is there a way that somebody can trade for him? I still think if you're debating what do we do? Huntley is more likely to be moved in a trade, I think, than DTR is. But those are the two positions I'm looking at. I mean, obviously, offensive line and defensive line depth are really important. But I'll ask you, what defensive players are you looking at this coming game? Because I think we saw last week the long touchdown. I want everybody to take it with a grain of salt with Ronnie Hickman. It literally looked like he got injured mid-hip turn. Everybody take a deep breath for that. But I know. Yeah, I know.
Your boy,
I'm sounding like
I'm like, oh, Max.
No, I was saying I'm sounding like an apologist with Ronnie Hickman, but the reality, I saw him turn, and I was like, he just got hurt. Everybody take a deep breath. But DB depth is a valid thing to look at, valid questions to have for it. Vikings receiver room is very deep. So I think even if you don't get the starters for much, you're going to get good tests with these guys. Who are you looking at defensively? Because everybody's eyes are on the offense. At the end of the day, defense matters as much. So I'm curious who you're looking at defensively.
I'm watching the whole defense. Because what we saw in that, I know, granted, it's preseason. It's week one. Man, they must have been drinking too much of the Kool-Aid. They must have been not awake. Something was there. Something was wrong. And when I saw that, it's just like, if this is what our third and fourth stringers look like, oh man, we may actually have some concerns, because they did not look like that last year. We were winning games last year with our third and fourth stringers. They were making plays. They were creating turnovers. They were filling gaps. They were flying across the field. There were a couple guys that you could point to on this defense. I believe Brady Breeze was everybody's favorite, who was flying around. Devin Bush was making some plays around. But other than that, there weren't many guys on the defensive side of the ball that I was looking at. I'm more so like, who is this guy? What number is this? Why isn't he making these plays? Why are every quarterback on the Green Bay Packers depth chart carving us up as if they were Tom Brady? It made no sense to me. So there isn't one specific player. I'm watching everybody, because that was embarrassing.
Yeah, I think embarrassing is the best way to put it, especially after the Packers took their starters out. I was like you said, we won and were in games because of depth pieces on both sides of the ball, but defensively too. I don't know. The secondary depth scares me. And you look at what they have on paper and you think it should be better than it is. But when you watch what they do, Ronnie Hickman does get beat. That's the reality of it. You watch guys like Cam Mitchell. I thought Cam Mitchell was fine, but the other depth, especially at safety, what are we going to do with a guy like Rodney McLeod, who maybe a little bit later on in his career could be more physically limited? Where's DeAnthony Bell's home? I'm
DeAnthony
not
Bell's
skeptical.
been out too, which is, I think, is playing a factor, which hurts us. If DeAnthony Bell's out and this is what our secondary is looking like, he's maybe more of a valuable piece than we were considering in the front runner, just looking at Hickman.
Yeah, that's true too. And especially because the Browns rely so much on their DB depth, their sub packages, their best packages are 5 DBs. So you're going to have somebody step in, whether it's Who knows who it's going to be at this point? It could be anybody. I'm definitely looking at the secondary. I think D-line depth is important too, but I honestly, shifting back to the offensive side of the ball, am really curious as to see where they're going to shift around these, on paper, second string guys, because the reality is if Conklin and Wills are not ready to go week one, which it doesn't seem like they will be, at least at this point. Conklin was out there the past couple of days just standing there, but he was out there. Do you trust James Hudson? Like that's my thing. How much do you trust him? Which tackle position do you want to put him at? I'm still waiting for the DeJuan Jones at least trial on the other side. I don't think we're going to see it, but how much do you trust him? Like, can you trust Hakeem Adeniji at all? Where do you want to put him? Like, I need to see something here. And I thought Zach Zinter was okay last week. Obviously, he had the big penalty that nullified the touchdown. That happens if you're a guard. That I get it.
Especially on
Thankfully,
an
this
RPO.
sport not try, but
I mean, that was on an RPO play too. So when you look it back, it's like, oh, that's so ticky tack. But hey, rules are rules. They've trusted James Hudson throughout this whole process. I think it would be a little bit different if he didn't have a little bit of familiarity. I think it'd be different if he didn't play next to Joel Petonio. I think there'd be some real concerns there. But for the simple fact that he's been here, done that with this team, is he the best? No, obviously, clearly not, which is why we're talking about him at the backup position. But for him to be the backup position, I don't think you have anyone other than you can trust than James Hudson. And like you said, it doesn't look like we're going to get that DeJuan Jones on the left side, the experiment at all. So we can pretty much put that to bed. I think until we can really see what the starters look like, or, if Jed continues to remain out, because there's been no talk on when he's going to be back. Like, what's going on with that? Let's just see what happens, man, because this is a completely new offense, completely new offensive line coach. There's a lot of different moving pieces in that room, and I just don't think you can see it until it's actually out there and performing.
Yeah, we wait to see. I mean, eyes are on the backups this coming week against the Vikings in the preseason. The next week, Deshaun Watson will play. At least that's what Kevin Stefanski told us. Against the Seattle Seahawks. Probably more starters as well. Interesting timing. I'm not a huge proponent of the let them play the last week of the preseason. Like, this is the week where I look, I'm like, okay, starters should be playing. Basically give them a month off until the next time. But, if you want to see successful repetitions, that's the best place to do it. The closest game to week one. So I do get that. I want you to give me your player of the game this coming week. Who, when it's all said and done, who is going to make a name for themselves going into camp week 4, but preseason week 3 in Cleveland?
Man, it's kind of, well, we know Deshaun Watson and these starters are getting a lot of good reps in this practice, which, I'll be in attendance. Shout out to my man 3-4, you know what I mean? But on the defensive side of the ball, anybody, please just show me something, okay?
Yeah.
But I think I'm leaning towards DTR again, man. I don't know why. I think he's going to make this very uncomfortable. I think he's going to put a lot of pressure on everybody. Because if we're talking about a little bit more praise if that touchdown doesn't get called back, because that was a beautiful dart. So I'm gonna lean DTR, but I'm gonna take a receiver, and I think we'll see if DTR is gonna be the guy. He's got to throw it to somebody. Jamari Thrash has got to separate himself. I think we've seen some flashes in the recent training camps. He's been catching some nice sideline passes and stuff like that, and he caught some nice balls against Green Bay. So give me Jamari Thrash for my MVP. Let's see DTR get him a touchdown.
I like that. I think defensively, I'm on the same page. I just want to see something like just something. Somebody make a play, force a turnover, sack, like literally anything. Just need to see some depth, some life pop from that depth. Offensively, I'm looking at two guys. Number one, and we didn't really talk about this much. Nick Harris is back after a very short stint away, like literally 5 months away from the team. But Nick Harris is back, assuming he does dress and he does play. Want to be able to feel comfortable with the offensive line depth. Obviously, losing a backup center is never good. If you lose your starting center, it can really derail your offensive line. So making sure you feel comfortable with your backup center is super important. But another guy who I talked about earlier, Zaire Mitchell-Patton, like he had 3 catches this past game against Green Bay. I think When you talk about the tight end depth, I mean, I know you are on the on the side that it's not as much of a concern. I think it is a little bit of a concern, at least depth wise. I want to be not necessarily convinced, but comfortable with a third string tight end, whether it's Aikens going down, knock on wood he doesn't, or Njoku going down, knock on wood he doesn't. Any of the tight ends ahead of him go down. Like I want to feel comfortable with, again, another bigger body, he's 6'5", 260, a bigger guy who can step in, go make plays, do the right thing, help in the run game too. I want to be at least moderately comfortable at that position, especially as it relates to depth.
I mean, it's just go back to what we always talk about in every episode. It's just like, when have we been so concerned about a third string guy? Like, it's such a blessing to be in this position. And I'm soaking in every moment, whether the haters could, oh, you guys are the Browns, you'll go right back to, nah, I'm enjoying this ride, baby. We arguing about third stringers over here in Cleveland while y'all worrying about Jamar Chase holding out, T. Higgins need a new contract, what quarterback's going to play here in this city. Like, y'all got other stuff to worry about. We worried about depth pieces over here, man.
Yeah, exactly. Good problems to have, especially in the preseason, because it gives us stuff to talk about. But we appreciate you guys watching. We appreciate you guys listening. Again, if you're new, you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Check out the socials in our bio as well. If you're listening on Spotify, any other podcast platform, make sure to follow. Give it 5 stars if you haven't already, so the next episode shows up in your feed. Zay, any final words before we sign off?
We might see you guys. I know, Max, you said you'll probably be down at the Muni Lot this week. If I'm not down there, which more than likely I'll be down there, you'll see us down there. So please, if you see us, don't be afraid to come up to us. We'd be more than welcome to talk some football with you, say what's up. And as always, man, here we go, Brownies. Here we go.
Bob took a beat in there, dude. Gosh.
Yes,
yeah, if you guys see us downtown, don't hesitate to say what's up. We appreciate you guys watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Go Browns.